Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of What's Wrong with Mike, a weekly show where we look into what is wrong with Mike, what's Mike saying now, and why is Mike wrong. So what's Mike been saying? Here he is.
I tell you what I like about all the educators whinging away currently over one, the curriculum redo, and two, the Treaty of Waitangi treatment. They are at least standing their ground.
Here Mike uses very emotional language to make it very, very clear that he's not on the side of any of the educators out there because they're whinging, which is a negative term just to say where Mike really stands. But what he's trying to do is build a case here to say that standing up and saying no to a government could be a good thing.
They're having their say. And that's no bad thing. Struck me yesterday when I read Roger Gray's speech, Roger Gray of the Auckland Port, when he talked of New Zealand, of naysayers, of the cruise people he visited in Miami and their view of New Zealand not wanting a cruise industry, of Jacinda Ardern calling them petri dishes.
Hang on a minute, stop right there, Mike. Roger Gray actually misquoted Dame Jacinda Ardern. A fact check reveals that, in fact, at no stage did Jacinda Ardern actually call cruise ships petri dishes at all. In fact, that's quite wrong. And it's actually quite disgusting, really, that Mike is actually repeating fake news here to a very, very large audience of very, very angry, sometimes hater bots and hater people who hate Jacinda Ardern and blame her wrongly. And here we have an example of Mike being wrong because Mike is actually saying Jacinda Ardern said this, but she didn't. In fact, Roger Gray was incorrect and should actually apologise to Dame Jacinda if he had any decency at all. But also, I'd just like to point out that everything that's being said here is all based on anecdotes. There's no evidence of what people in Miami actually said. When Roger Gray says that they call us New Zealand, saying no is a very, very good thing at times, particularly to things like, say, a genocide, say no to that, say the invasion of all sorts of pests into New Zealand that destroy our waterways and our environment, say no to that. That's a good idea. Say no to far-right governments that are kind of fascist. Saying no sometimes is a very, very good, healthy thing, and we should all be able to say no, and we just say no to bad ideas when it comes to education. But most of all, I think we need to say no to rubbish when it's just based on anecdotes and no evidence.
Where were the Roger Grays when she was actually in charge of this place and basically wrecking the joint? Where were they then?
Where were the Roger Grays? Well, in the first year of COVID, everybody was basically unified. It was a team of 5 million. The best business response and economic response was the best health response. And we were all very, very proud of the way that we all worked together as a team. But in the latter part of COVID, there was a huge amount of upcry and frustration from all over the business community. And it just appears that Mike is actually a person suffering from the memory of a goldfish, or even worse. Perhaps for 12 seconds, Mike can remember what actually happened during COVID, but maybe he's forgotten 3 words: Sir Ian Taylor. Remember Sir Ian Taylor actually moaning and moaning and moaning and whinging and complaining all the time about how when it came to bringing in masks and other things that he thought, like breath tests, etc., other technology, he just couldn't get it through and over the line. So there was a lot of naysaying and a lot of moaning and groaning about the government. There was also someone called Sir John Key, who I seem to recall, although Mike doesn't remember, said something about a hermit kingdom at some point, and a whole bunch of people from the business community complained, including Mike, who did nothing but complain after he realised that his own ass had been saved, and he flip-flopped over to being a plan B, let's be like Sweden, against all scientific advice, because maybe money was more important than human life. Now, Jacinda Ardern, she actually saved maybe 20,000 lives of people who are there today, and it's kind of skipped over by the money people as if, oh, well, human life, so what? Who cares about living people? Who cares about the fact that our hospitals didn't get overrun? Who cares about any of those kind of real world effects? And let's just talk about the money. That's the only thing that matters to us. And so, of course, Mike is now making up, because he's got a bad memory, a bad case of some kind of dementia or amnesia, that nobody complained at all. Everything was just like tickety-boo. Everyone was silent.
The educators, you see, are bold enough to tell the current government they don't like what's going on. But where was the business community as their companies were being shafted for all those years during COVID?
And nobody up north complained about how they were cut off off. There was no frustration expressed. Davy Boy wasn't actually standing over every announcement of a change to some kind of a level of protection, and everyone was just like sweet as. So Mike's obviously wrong. Mike's actually constructing another one of these straw man arguments where he builds a premise that actually isn't true. So here's the big hole in Mike's argument. He just doesn't remember conveniently about all the complaining. So the Roger Grays, they were there. Everyone was complaining from small business to big business, but they were just frustrated. And of course, at the end of the day, everybody did what they had to do and they got through COVID, although there were some losses. And, now there are a small bunch of people who are still very, very upset about that. But this is a global pandemic. So remember, people, global pandemics actually are bad. They're not good for everybody. They're not a normal time. They're a time when things actually go wrong for a lot of people, when people do lose things, including loved ones. So what did we all expect? Well, we actually got out of that pretty well, and there were some bad effects. But Mike is wrong to continue just pretending that nobody actually spoke up at all.
In the prizes for gonads and backbone, the educators win on that one hands down. Not that they're right, of course. And in that is the gargantuan irony. The educators complain about rules and change and yet are irrefutably on the wrong side of history, given the education outcomes produced in this country.
Well, the education outcomes produced in this country over a long period of time. And, frequently people talk about what they were like around about 2001 when New Zealand scored quite highly in PISA exams for 15-year-olds, and since that time there'd been a decline. Now this is actually under a series of different kind of ideologies from a series of different ministries of education with different views. So it's actually not clear-cut, it's not irrefutable like Mike says. Mike's actually being very, very misleading again to say that it's very clear-cut and blank. Basically, the educators themselves have protested against certain governments. For example, national standards, when that came in, that caused a big controversy, and just about everybody was up in arms about it. And then the results that it produced were misleadingly used to sort of say, well, look, something about the Labour Party had produced bad results. Then when it came to COVID, don't you all recall how PISA itself missed a whole year? And then when it did come back, it said that the pandemic had resulted in a 10% decrease in the standard of reading and a 15% decrease in the standard of maths across 81 OECD nations. So pandemics actually have a big effect as well. So all those kind of global external factors bring down the standards. So Mike's not, being very nuanced here. He's actually being incorrect. And I think we're quite safe in saying that the basis for Mike's argument here is wrong. So that's another thing that's wrong with Mike.
And yet business, nowhere to be seen or heard, despite the fact that we all knew the country was being strangled by power freaks and they would eventually be proved right, but they didn't say anything at the time.
Bullshit. The country was not being strangled by power freaks, and they were not. The business community were not proven right in the end. What actually happened was that there was a Royal Commission of Inquiry that found that we did very, very well, and that there was a period of time, maybe a few weeks, where we carried on mandates a bit too long. There was some disadvantage, I think, under Te Tiriti to some of the Maori population when it came to the vaccine rollout. And of course, there were some things like the lockdown in Auckland that maybe could have been finished a little bit sooner, but it was very, very tricky. And of course, this was all in real time, so it's very easy to look back in hindsight. But what we were doing is we were transitioning from an elimination strategy as we rolled out the vaccine to something that was sort of more about suppression. And then, of course, a new variant called Omicron came out, and it took about 3 months before anyone scientifically could tell you what its characteristics were, whether it was more lethal, whether it was more infectious, what we're really looking at here. And as a bit of luck, humanity ended up getting a bit of a gift because Omicron was more mild than some of the previous versions and variations like Delta, which was a real killer. And we'd managed through that lockdown to avoid a lot of that kind of death and destruction. So as it turned out, the results were not, like Mike said, proving the business community correct. It just said that, like, there were a couple of times when, there were a few weeks that went by that we overdid it. And Jacinda says, oh, well, look, I'd rather be accused of doing too much in a pandemic than doing too little. And I think she's right if you value human life and not just money.
But as much as I defend educators' rights to speak up, there is something deeply insidious about the way educators, particularly unions, seem to operate. Now, the list, the signatories that we've heard of principals who've signed this protest to the Education Minister over curriculum change, it is driven, the Education Minister told us, by the unions. And it's a standover tactic. It's an intimidatory play. You are bullied and harried and cajoled into signing.
Stop right there, Mike. That just simply isn't true. That's wrong again. The truth of the matter is that Tanya Waikato, the lawyer, is the person that started the list. And she came out on a couple of days ago and basically said that she hasn't heard anything from anybody, from any union, and the messages that she has got, that she's added people to the list were from principals, presiding members of boards of trustees, and extremely proud parents. And she had 21 letters from principal associations throughout the country, including right here in the sunny Bay of Plenty. So she said, please inform all of us exactly where you say this is standing over principals and boards, and provide some proof about this very serious allegation. Now, at the time she was talking to Sam Uffindell, who had grabbed hold of all of this speculation and this kind of technique that is used by the National Party to demonise unions, and they just kind of made everything up. It was all fake news, because Tanya Waikato basically is the person that's organically grown all this on social media, and it hasn't had anything much to do with unions at all. Now, notice that what Mike had to say was that Erica Stanford was the one that said this, and this is something, if you watch politicians from the National Party a lot, that they do a lot. They make up anecdotes. They say, some anonymous person who cannot be verified has told me and sent me a text or a message or given me a phone call where they said they were very, very afraid, and they felt stood over, but they reluctantly decided to go along because they were just so fearful about the reprisals, and we think it's disgusting, but they cannot prove. So, Erica, man up. Come on, show us the evidence. Where's the evidence, Erica? And Mike is actually just going along without actually any challenge. He should be challenging Erica, but has bias got in the way of Mike? Maybe something is wrong with Mike here. Maybe he's just so right-wing that he's not challenging Erica Stanford.
That they're acting out of fear, sort of like business hating the decisions but saying nothing.
So hang on a minute. So now it's wrong to say no because it's acting out of fear. So it was right to say no, but now it's wrong.
Fear is no way to live your life. But for some, I get it. I guess life is short. Who needs the grief? But if that is the mentality in education, if that is the modus operandi of the unions, what sort of world are our kids entering into? What sort of brainwashing, whether overt or subliminal, do our kids get subjected to?
Well, our kids are being subjected to an Atlas Network curriculum formula that comes out of the UK and the United States that tries to standardise everything and kind of wipe out Indigenous stories and history and knowledge and wisdom, and basically kind of like vanillaise us all into something that's European or something from another place that's nothing to do with New Zealand. And that's the brainwashing that's going on. What we're seeing is a small group of people who are in education, the likes of Elizabeth Rata. We're seeing people like Mr. Michael Johnson from the NZ Initiative, all sitting in there behind Erica, kind of behind the scenes, tunnelling away, and other names that have been named on social media as well. And they're kind of like bringing their ideology into force, and they're using these anecdotal techniques like saying Erica is disgusted based on anecdotes that cannot be proven, and that all of these people that have signed this thing have done so because unions have to be demonized, right? And we've got Mike trying to make out that this is all very, very true, and this is not not on, and we're being demonized and pressured by some sort of nefarious bunch of unions that just don't even exist. It can't be proven. So where is the evidence? It's not there, Mike. That's what's wrong with Mike.
The minister, in telling us all this on Tuesday at the press conference, said it is disgusting. She emphasised the word disgusting. Anyone want to disagree with that?
The Mike Hosking Breakfast.
Well, at the moment, 57% of all schools in New Zealand, I think it's 1,448 schools, have signed on to the list. And I would say that they would actually all disagree with the way that Erica Stanford has mischaracterized the situation as disgusting. What is disgusting is when you bring a think tank in and you try and silence and gag people with your non-disclosure agreements so that teachers can't talk to each other about what they've said or done, when the teachers don't see any of their own feedback showing up in any of the paperwork, when we see these teach to the test gimmicks and tricks that are meant and highlighted and hyped in headlines as huge success when it isn't success, when we ignore all of the people who are actual professors of mathematics and teaching and learning and all of the body of experience in this country, and we get led round by the nose by some pretty kind of dodgy Atlas Network ideological positioning in our education system. Don't forget that the NZ Initiative have been writing papers about how they want to reform our education system for years, and you can go back and look at the entire history here of what they've been saying about how we need to do what they think we need to do, how we need to copy what's done in the Tufton Bank think tanks over in the UK and some of the models overseas. You've got Crimson Education with John Key on the make behind the scenes when it comes to education as well. And so we're seeing this kind of whole politicization using Mike, who is frequently not right at all. In fact, Mike is wrong. So I hope you all can sort of now see what's wrong with Mike. So there's a lot wrong with Mike. Mike's been wrong here from the get-go when it came to misquoting Jacinda Ardern, when it came to kind of like forgetting about all of the complaining during COVID that it came from the business community, when it came to sort of saying, well, look, the minister is disgusted because she's had some anecdotal stuff that no one's seen any evidence of, and just kind of like running with that without any challenge. So that's all from this episode of What's Wrong with Mike. Tune in again next week when we hear what's wrong with Mike, because there's a lot wrong with Mike. See you all later.
Welcome to G News, the good news.
Yeah, right.